Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for attending MCLA's MCLE presentation given by Myer Sankary. We are so grateful to have Mr. Sankary present on Robert Cialdini's Principles of Persuasion. Myer Sankary is the founder of MCLA, and he has over 40 years of experience as a probate attorney and probate mediator. And he was trained by Robert Cialdini on these principles of persuasion. And so we're very lucky to have him share these with all of us today. I just would like to go over a few housekeeping notes. We are pending approval from the state bar on credit for this program. And as soon as we receive the accreditation, we will email all of you certificates for attendance. We will also email a questionnaire that would be great if you can send back to us. We are really excited that we launched our MCLE program for the year, and we will be holding 2 to 3 MCLE presentations each month. So please keep in touch with us and join our newsletter to find out more information on upcoming MCLE presentations. And at the end of this presentation, we will open up a question and answer session. And so if you have any questions, you can feel free to add them in the Q&A box, and we will monitor those and respond to those at the end of the presentation. Again, I appreciate all of you for attending, and I'm just going to wait a couple minutes to let everyone get settled in as they're joining, and then we can go ahead and have Mr. Sankary begin his presentation momentarily. Okay, Myer, I don't want to delay everyone or you, so if you'd like to go ahead and begin, we'll keep letting attendees in as they trickle in. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the introduction, Devin. First of all, I want to thank the MCLA staff. We started this organization over 10 years ago with a heart prayer, and we somehow survived until now. And now we have an outstanding group of staff members, starting with Devin, who's a tremendous asset of doing our outreach and marketing. We're going to have an article in the Daily Journal, hopefully by the end of the month or next month. So look for it if you get the Daily Journal. And we have Crystal Martinez, who's been absolutely the backbone of our organization in making sure that it runs properly now. And she is the overall program manager, and also has done a great deal in the technology field. We also have 2 new employees that I want to thank. One is Jasmine, who's been doing the work of our marketing, and also our newest acquisition is Ashley, who has got many talents, and she's going to be doing the operational side. So if you deal with MCLA, you'll see their names. They're excellent people that really care about our program. They've helped us establish the purpose of our program, which was to educate the public about using alternative dispute resolution as a way of settling disputes peacefully. And so we have been able to maintain that principle, and that's why we're now offering these courses, because we want the public to know, and particularly the lawyers, to help you understand the mediation process as well as we know it. I've been doing mediations now for over 25 years, and I am going to start now with talking about Dr. Cialdini, who has really captured the field of science of influence. What happened, I was teaching a course with a professor at USC Executive Business School in the master program. And one lecture, he was talking to the students and asked, have you used the Cialdini principles? And I was amazed at the response of the students who said they used it and they got better results. And so I looked at the professor and said, who is this Cialdini? What is it? And he says, well, I'll give you his book and his video at the time, and you can watch what he has to say. And I was so stricken by what he had to say that I said, this is exactly what we do in mediation. This is exactly what lawyers need to know. And so I decided I would find out about his workshops. So I went to Arizona State and I went to one of his workshops, and it was a most transformative experience. We had people from all over the world, major executives, and the method that he used was just tremendously educational. So I was totally infatuated with the program, the science, and the tools that he taught. And then he offered to do training for those who will do his workshop, who would be his emissary, so to speak, and do his workshop. And I applied for that. I went to Arizona State again for 2 weeks studying science of influence and all the work that he's done. We had to do presentations, and I was certified to do his 2-day workshop. So that's why we're here. It's become a passion of mine. And I believe that by sharing this information, I think it will make our bars, our members of the bar, much more effective, as well as our mediators. So the interesting thing about the principles of persuasion, which he discusses in his book, the main thing that he points out is they are very useful tools to achieve mutually beneficial objectives in negotiations and sales and any place where you need to persuade the other person. However, he warns in his book that these are also very powerful weapons of influence, which have been used by those perpetrators to extract huge amounts from their victims. So these tools you need to be aware of so that you don't fall victim to these very powerful persuasive tools. So the program is really to provide you with the tools that will make you more effective, to provide you with tools to be more ethically persuasive, and also to prevent you from falling subject to the perpetrators. So as a lawyer or mediator, I'm assuming most of you in the audience are either a lawyer or mediator. How important is this rapport and trust with your client or the parties to a dispute? We did a study, a research on this, and it turns out that one of the two most important elements in selection of an attorney or a mediator is whether the client feels that there's rapport and trust with you. So it's important to understand this is really the connection that you need in order to make your persuasion effective. So do you have a consistent strategy for applying these principles based on the scientific research, or do you persuade intuitively? And I would say most of us do it intuitively. At a certain point in time, when you learn the principles, which I'm going to repeat over and over again here, when you see these principles, you will see that you will use them in tandem with each other. And it's helping. What you're trying to do is help the other party, whether it's a judge, jury, your negotiating partner, your opponent, your client, help the other side make a decision that you believe is fair to both parties or to all persons involved. And if you can be the agent to help guide decisions, you will have a powerful tool for your career. So initially, Cialdini wrote a book called The 6 Universal Principles. And now there are 7 because he wrote a second book, which is called Persuasion, in which he came up with the 7th principle. So in this book called Persuasion, he founded the 7th principle, which is unity, which I'll talk about later. But the most important factor in this book is about focused attention. Where you get people to focus their attention, you will get them to make decisions in that direction. And that's not an easy task, I will tell you. In a mediation, when it's hot and heavy discussions back and forth, you need to have these tools at your fingertips to know how to use them. And I'll give you an illustration of how I did use it in one particular area, one mediation that turned out successfully. So the persuasion concept is it's everything you do before you make the request or try to guide their decision. It's setting up the conditions. So part of using these tools is knowing how to frame things, how to help people make choices between multiple choices, and how to set up the context so that they're ready to make a decision in your favor. And so what Cialdini says in this book is that you want to focus people's attention on the main issues. So in this case, mediators and lawyers want to start with telling their clients to focus their attention on the main issues that need to be resolved. What are the possible solutions? And then talk about pre-mediation as an opportunity to build rapport and trust. So before you begin a mediation, what preliminary questions can you ask in a survey, perhaps in an email, to direct the attention of the parties to be prepared and receptive? Since we received the contract last year from the court for the referral program, I don't know how many of you know about it, but we've received over 1,100 cases last year from direct referral by the court. So we have a lot of data, a lot of experience now with our mediators in these unlimited jurisdiction cases, which includes employment, real estate, personal injury, contract law. All of these kinds of cases are coming to us, and now we're able to do statistical analysis with our new program. We have a very sophisticated automated program that gives us the data that we need to understand what makes up a good settlement, how parties reach that settlement, and so forth, why the settlement is not reached, and how can we overcome the impasse, and so forth. So we're getting a lot of data, and we're hoping to bring this information to you in the future. So that's why we want you to keep alert to new programs that we're going to offer with this new information. So one of the questions that I like to ask is, are all the parties prepared to have a productive mediation within the next 30 days? What does this do? It limits the time frame. It makes the parties or the attorneys focus on, will we be ready within this time period? What do we need to do to get ready? And that is a question that we think the judges should ask before they assign the case to anybody. They should ask, are you prepared to mediate within 30 days? We get a lot of cases where the parties are not ready, and therefore we have to wait, and it's a lot more administrative effort to wait months before they're ready to mediate. So that's one of the more important questions to focus attention. Are they ready? And then in preparation for the case, will you focus your attention on a fair solution acceptable to both parties? Now, that may be an intrusive early on question, but you know what? How many of us as lawyers, and I've been practicing actually over 50 years. I started in 66, so I'm close to a 60-year. Anyway, that this is very important, that we need to think about what is a fair solution for both parties and change our mindset to say, how much can I win only for my party? Because if you're trying to settle a case, you need to know that there's somebody on the other side that has to voluntarily say yes. And so what I ask is, please inform me about your different settlement alternatives that would be acceptable to your client or what won't be, so I know the range of what I'm dealing with. Okay, so these are the 6 principles: reciprocity, commitment, social proof, liking and authority, and scarcity. I'm going to now give you all the principles, including the 7th principle called unity. So in the liking principle, we prefer to say yes to those who we know and like. The reciprocity says we feel obligated to give back to others who have given to them. The authority principle says we definitely rely on people with superior knowledge or perspective for guidance on how to respond and what decisions to make. So when you go to a dentist or a doctor or a lawyer or anybody that you're asking for opinions, you're looking for someone with superior knowledge that is an authority, different from someone in authority like a judge or a cop. So consensus means that people will follow what other people are doing. Consistency means that if they take a stand, an early stand, they will be consistent with the next stand that they need to take or next decision. And then scarcity is about loss framing. People appear opportunities appear more valuable when they're less available, and then people try to avoid a loss more than even to seek a gain based on social science statistics. Unity means that when we bond with each other, we will be more influential. So, what are the benefits of influence? It helps cultivate the positive associations and rapport that we're talking about. It reduces the uncertainty and doubt because we have other proof that other people are doing the same, and we have an authority figure who's giving us good information. And it motivates action through the principles of consistency and scarcity. Above all, if you use ethical influence, it will create the trust and rapport that will make lawyers and mediators more effective with the client and the public. So I thought this image really illustrated something important about trust. Which person here is in the role of the mediator? And I think everybody would agree the mediator is the guy who's holding out his hands and has to be there a split second that the other person is flying through the air. And if she doesn't trust this guy who's going to catch her, she shouldn't do the project. Okay, so anyway, this engages both the emotion, the trust, and confidence in the other side. So by using these tools, it's increasing the likelihood you'll get others to follow your direction. It's the opposite of compulsion, and you use it in everything: negotiations, acquiring a client, keeping the client, managing your employees, persuading the judge, jury, settling cases, negotiating with your opponent. And these principles are very effective because they work at a subconscious level. It focuses your attentions on the merits of your claim. It overcomes skepticism and generates trust. All of this is based on scientific studies that have been by Cialdini and many others that he cites in his writings. And one thing he discovered is that many scientists have proven the paradox of too much choice. In our modern society, there is so much information and so many decisions that it creates uncertainty. And therefore, if you have a better persuasion principle, you'll be able to prevail. So scientists call that the brain tries to find the quickest, easiest solution to make a decision. They call it satisficing. So you should know about how the brain works. So there are decision triggers that fix action patterns. If you press somebody's button, though I've sometimes somebody presses my button, I won't say who, but I can react in a certain way. They know that they're not going to get a happy reaction. But we need to know that sometimes we have to be careful how we present a statement to a client or to a party or to anybody, because you can evoke the wrong response. So the key is setting up persuasion, that is all the information that I talked to you about. The first principle, called the liking. We say yes to people we know and like. I thought this guy represented somebody who we would really like, and probably if he said, Myer, I'd like you to do me a favor, I would jump at it. Then there's this guy. If I met him on the street, I'd probably turn around and run. Some of you may remember who this is. He was big in my day and time. So it's activated. Liking is activated by 5 important factors. 1, we say yes to people who are like us. We say yes to people who like us. So if you can get them to like you, you'll be more effective. We say people whom we like. We say yes to people who cooperate with us and who pay us compliments. And so if you learn the art of paying a genuine compliment, you can create better trust and rapport. And I thought this was a perfect example. Nothing beats a smile, turning strangers into friends. And that's exactly what this principle is about, is liking. So you're also going to like people who are in your team. Like if you're a USC fan, they're rabid fans in UCLA. You don't want to go to that game unless you're on one side or the other. And so even when you ask a favor of somebody, you can turn an enemy into a friend. And that's called the Ben Franklin effect, because there was a story about Ben Franklin who actually had an enemy in Congress. And he walked over to him one day and said, would you do me a favor? I heard you have an excellent book that I'd like to read. Can I borrow it? And I'll bring it back. And the guy said, okay. That's all he did. And then Franklin read the book, returned it, and said, thank you very much. I appreciate it. If I can do the same for you, let me know. They became fast friends. So notice the way the words were phrased. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Someday I hope to do the same for you. And I'm going to talk about how that creates the reciprocity principle. But liking, you need to schmooze a little bit in order, and you wonder why some mediators might take a little time to schmooze to get a little bit better understanding of the people and their work and their home and their family. It's because we get to better understand and develop a relationship. In the book called Never Split the Difference, many of you probably have read it. Voss was a hostage negotiator, and he said, by focusing on understanding and influencing your counterpart's emotions and decision making by using empathy, active listening, pointed questioning, and shifting from just logic based to more of an emotion based that can achieve your negotiating objectives. And here's an example in literature and history about Mark Antony, who said, friends, Romans, and countrymen. By using those words, he aligned himself to be liked by the audience who had just killed Caesar, and they thought Antony was going to try to change their minds. And he said, lend me your ears. It's a favor. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. And by starting this, he connected with the audience and turned them to oppose the perpetrators of the killing. So it was very effective. Now, this is interesting. Why do I show these images? This is the case I was going to tell you where I used the principle of liking, both after studying it and intuitively. This was my biggest challenge. How can I apply the liking principle with Vietnamese Buddhist nuns? Now, I have no connection with Buddhism. I have no connection with these nuns, but I had a mediation case many years ago involving a dispute over a Vietnamese Buddhist monk's estate. The nuns were suing the estate because the founding monk of this Vietnamese temple here in California, in Los Angeles, the founding monk died with an estate in which he gave $250,000 to his mistress and $250,000 to his brother. The nuns claimed that he had embezzled the funds. They were maligning his name. It was all in the papers, and it was terrible. The brother said this was not, his brother did not embezzle. He got money for doing weddings and doing services and so forth. He never took any money. But anyway, the nuns insisted that he took the money and that he violated two vows, one of chastity, two of poverty, and he can't possibly have died with 500,000. So the mistress gave up immediately because it was a very tight community. She would be cut out from the community if she didn't give it up. But the brother insisted that this was not right and that the money that his brother earned should be honored. Well, what happened was I was having a difficulty relating to these nuns who were represented by an attorney. They were sitting very stone-faced without much expression. And then I asked the question. I had studied a little bit before I went to the mediation about Vietnamese Buddhism. And I asked them, is it true that Buddha is the founder of your faith? And they said, yes. And I said, is it true that the name Buddha means the enlightened one? And they said, yes. And I said, in Buddhism, you also believe that the world is well connected and there's no coincidence. Right. I said, there is a coincidence, though. My name, Myer, in Hebrew, means the enlightened one. With that, all three nuns stood up, bowed. They chatted among themselves. They talked to the attorney. They turned to me and said, what do you recommend? So I turned someone who was totally alien to my faith into liking me and trusting me using authority and all the other principles that I'll talk about. But what I suggested in the final analysis was the brother would give up half of the funds and donate it to a school in honor of the name of his deceased brother. And they would have a children's fund to educate kids at their school. The nuns thought that was an amazing solution. They agreed to it. brother could keep a little of the money, they get most of it back, and they can create an educational facility for their children. So these are the things you can do if you look for ways in which you can persuade people to make good decisions that's better for everybody. The rule of reciprocity, and I've got to be careful of my time. Let's see, we've got about another 30 minutes. So I'm hopeful. I've got through two principles. I'll go as quickly as possible. If you have any questions while we're going along, you can put them in the question and answer as well, and we'll try to share those at the end. But the rule of reciprocity is very, very powerful. It creates an obligation for the other to return a favor or a gift. And these are, researchers in every society, there's an obligation to give, to receive, repay. It's the foundation of morality. It's a social obligation. You scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. Look, even in the animal kingdom, that's what happens. Reciprocity expressed also in our conventional wisdom. Give and you shall receive. What goes around comes around. You have to give to get. Do unto others as you would have them do to you. One good turn deserves another. What's good for the goose? Tit for tat. I scratch your back, I'll scratch mine. And this was an interesting I found. Eskimos saying where to store your excess food. In the belly of your neighbor. That's called reciprocity. And what do we call those who do not reciprocate? Do you have any thoughts? You go to you take people out to lunch and you pay for it, and there's one person who never reciprocates. What do you call that person? A moocher. Or teenagers. Teenagers haven't learned how to reciprocate. They expect everything come to them, but they need to learn how they must reciprocate. So in ancient Rome, it says, statesmen said we should give as quickly as we receive, cheerfully, quickly, without hesitation, for there's no grace in a benefit that sticks to the fingers. So how can you engage in reciprocity? The interesting thing about Cialdini and the workshop that I went to is you can read the book all you want. You can go to as many lectures by people who have read his books and talk about the principles. But unless you hear Dr. Cialdini about how you can use these principles in actual conditions for persuasion, it's very hard to understand how you can use this material. So one way that you can engage reciprocity is making a gift. Clearly, if you donate there's a feeling of the other person to reciprocate. Empathetic listening can also help. If you do somebody a favor, make a concession. So this is a big one. In negotiations, all mediations, there wouldn't be a mediation if the two parties agreed on everything, including the number that they would settle on. So we know that there's a difference in the amount that the plaintiff is demanding and the defendant is offering. It could be as much as $1 million on demand and $50,000 on the offering. Question is, who should make the first concession? And what would be the effect of the person making that first concession? I know it's taught to a lot of lawyers, and I was taught that when I was in a law firm. Don't make the first concession because they'll think you're too weak. Well, in fact, it empowers you, because if you make a reasonable concession, let's say from the million you come down to 900,000, then it creates an obligation on the other side to somewhat reciprocate. And that's why you need to think about methods that will allow you to reciprocate. So giving a compliment for mediators and for clients, even for attorneys, giving a compliment to your client for the hard work they've done makes them feel better and will be more cooperative and listen to your recommendations. And then there's a principle called if there's a rejection and you retreat, and then you make a smaller request. So, for example, you make $1 million demand, and the other side said 50,000. You said, well, that means you don't accept my million. They said, that's right. They said, so I understand you've rejected my million. That's right. So if you won't give me $1 million, will you think about giving me 900,000? Well, that's something we could think more about than the million. So if you see, you could actually get a rejection and then immediately come back and give a different choice, a lesser with a smaller request. That creates reciprocity. But does the give have to be monetary to be effective? Now, I've given this lecture to a lot of different companies. One was famous, was Merck. They were going through litigation. They asked me to come and give this presentation because they had got some pretty bad results. And so one of the things I asked them to do was think about what kind of non-monetary gifts and favors to engage reciprocity. So they said, well, if we're cooperative, we can expect others to be also cooperative. If I show appreciation of the other person, they'll show some appreciation of my work. If I'm friendly and likable, generally you can get friendly and likable back. If you're respectful, if you convey a sense of caring for lawyers and mediators, empathy and understanding, being genuine and authentic, show interest in others. And we came up with this whole list of other things that are non-monetary gifts, which could result in positive reciprocity. And then you could say, what is the effect of apology? Is it appropriate? Can you ask for forgiveness in a mediation? What do the parties want? And so you can have an entire a list of other non-monetary ways of initiating the reciprocity principle. So we don't have time to really go through it all, but that's why these programs are 2 days long, and we generally have maybe 20 or 30 people. We set up tables of 5 at the most and have them discuss these principles of how you would apply it in given situations. And so we're thinking about doing some study groups where we can actually apply these principles and see how each participant would use it in their own practice. So the next principle is the one of authority. This is interesting because it's not just that you have knowledge and expertise, which is obviously the principles of being someone who would be an authority, but the appearance of authority. Some of you might have remembered Marcus Welby, who was a TV doctor. He was not an authority on coffee, but yet when he made this ad for Sanka coffee, sales went through the roof because people associated this friendly smile and the fact that he was an authority as a doctor, even a TV doctor. He had the appearance of a doctor of authority. People start buying Sanka coffee because he said it was richer, much richer. Look at the words being used that are persuasive. So it's not someone who's an authority is not someone who is in authority like police officers. So or other people who have authority, some people don't listen to. So you have to have the trappings like clothing, like doctors wear their white jackets, certificates and diplomas. I don't know if you can walk into a doctor's office without seeing all of their diplomas and certificates of achievement, and the body language that you use, the power pose, the smile. By mirroring your target, you can sometimes also gain liking. And so using various poses, I wouldn't use the pose of the high power pose in most situations. That is not what I would call a very good example of authority. But anyway, people will rely on you become an authority by your knowledge and expertise. And that's what makes lawyers distinguished and mediators distinguished, is their expertise and experience in a particular type of law. And so people will trust you if they know that you have the level of experience and knowledge that is required for the task at hand. And that's why it's so important for mediators to know what areas they are competent to work in, because one of the principles of ethics is you shouldn't accept the case unless you're competent in that area to handle the mediation. So someone who's never done family law would not be expected to do well handling a family law dispute over child custody and visitation, or how to come up with spousal support computations. Same thing in probate. I find some people practicing in probate, they don't know much about it, and they become less expertise and less of an authority or trustworthy. But what's interesting about the concept of authority, you have to continually earn it. You have to show that you have the competence and expertise, but not over asserting it. The more you try to over assert that you're a brilliant, expert on this and that, it can also lead to a decline in respect and authority. So these are examples that I picked up years ago about Enron. These were people at the height of their profession, business, and they cooked the books, and look what happened. They lost all their authority. This guy, Bernie Madoff, used every principle of persuasion, and he conned people out in the biggest Ponzi scheme. Volkswagen lost its respect. These people lost their respect because of what they did. United had a problem. Airlines have a problem. So you can lose authority and respect in many different ways. But the important for lawyers and for mediators is to have a robust website that show your credentials and that parties look at it before they even meet with you, because that will tell them what your experience and knowledge is, and that you are an authority in a particular field. But what's interesting, I used Dr. Watkins because several years ago I had spine back surgery and I wanted the best that I could find. And I was referred to Dr. Watkins in the marina. And what's interesting, the reason I have all these jerseys is when you walk into his office, every wall, all up and down the wall, are jerseys from the most famous athletes who've had surgery with Dr. Watkins and have thanked him for restoring their career. Now, what better credentials can you have than that of someone showing your credentials of having successfully helped others like you with back surgery? Now, the principle of social of consensus means that people will more likely follow what other people are doing, the crowd. We basically are crowd instinct followers. And if you obviously know in today's world, the thumbs up, the liking, LinkedIn, all these social media, it's all about getting the herd. What's the herd doing? And you'll always look at reviews. I know I do before I buy something. Is I want to see what other people say about its utility. It's worth, what is it worth getting this product? And so we do look at social proof, that is looking at what others are doing. So how would this be used? And by the way, this is a picture of Verizon, which showed this large group of people, supporting, going for Verizon. And then, of course, we are persuaded by anxiety in the market that we are heard. People start, selling off, and stock prices plunge. And so we're herd animals. And so consensus, when many others are shown to be like this. That is, there's a study that was done where one person stopped on a street corner in New York. They were looking up and nobody paid attention. They just walked by. But they added another 3, and now a small crowd developed. And then when they had 5, there was almost, it blocked the street. You couldn't even get by because everybody was looking up, because there were 5 people standing there looking at nothing. But it shows that this is how consensus works, is that we have studies that show how teenagers start smoking, or how people can, use surveys and reviews and look at the like button on principles. So being similar others, and also when there's uncertainty about what choice to make. So if I want to choose a product between what phone should I buy now? Should I buy the iPhone, or should I buy an Android? And so I look at and so I'm uncertain. What decision should I make? And the more people that support one side than the other, I tend to follow, this is what most people are doing. Now, not everybody follows that, but that's kind of where we are today. So what is interesting is that you can use consensus to help you persuade by showing what others have made decisions and like this. So, I used to get settlements and verdicts. I don't know if everybody still does, but you can do it online, is to find out what kinds of cases have been settled and for how much, and what the injuries were, or what the contract issues were, et cetera. And so if you can research what similar cases are that are like yours, it's very persuasive to say that these people should follow what was done. Now, AI may be taking the place because it's all based on the information out there and consensus. So, for example, I gave in a termination of a lease dispute that I was mediating, I asked there was a difference. Unfortunately, the restaurant had to close because of COVID. He'd only been in the restaurant for a couple of years, and he had 8 years to go, and there was $1 million liability that he was facing, and he was facing bankruptcy. He said he just didn't have that kind of money. There was no way. The plaintiff, the landlord wanted, his money. So I tried to get them to negotiate as well they can, as best we could, on their own before we came up with a more, closer way of settlement. And what was interesting, I went into AI and gave all the facts, and I asked what would be a fair settlement proposal. And it came back with a number of 385,000. I don't know where it got it, but it obviously got it from the cloud and from consensus. And when I went back, I did not tell the parties what AI said, but they continued to negotiate, and they wouldn't stop, and they continued and continued. And the defendant agreed to pay $380,000. How was that possible? Well, sometimes you can get good information, current information, if you know how to use AI and use the prompts properly. You can probably get interesting answers. But should the mediator share the answer with the parties? I don't think so. I think the parties have to negotiate without that information, unless they do it themselves. So I don't know if they actually did the AI study and came up with that decision, but I doubt it. Anyway, the next one is commitment and consistency. If you make a stand early on, you try to be consistent with it. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because we don't have that much more time, but it is a powerful principle. And if you can get somebody to make a small stand, like, yes, I'm willing to settle this case today, then you have a better chance that they will follow up with that, trying to get that case settled. So with New Year's resolutions, you always want to kind of set a goal and write it down. And if you can get commitments, like for anything, small commitments, then breaking that commitment can be costly emotionally, personally, and so forth. It creates what's called cognitive dissonance if you don't follow up with what you previously said was your principle. So notice that in surveys, they can shape the way the recipient can answer the questions, and you have now committed yourself. So I got all kinds of stuff during the election about, do you believe that the Supreme Court should do X, Y, and Z? Yes. Well, please contribute because we can help. And so here's a survey where they asked the question, for an employee, I am satisfied as an employee. They took out the word not satisfied, and they gave them a choice. But by using the word I am satisfied, that focused their attention on what they were satisfied as opposed to looking at the negatives. So, examples were of consistent. That's why marriage vows are done openly. Openly, a small commitment can lead to big changes. We generally don't believe in flip-floppers, politicians, and particularly testimony that is inconsistent with prior statements made by a witness will definitely affect the client's credibility and will be disbelieved by the jury. I think many lawyers have had that wonderful moment when you've had an inconsistent prior statement and you can prove that the witness is not credible. And one of the things that you can do is in a final argument, you can remind the jury, now I am sure that you took the commitment to be fair and unbiased, and I'm sure that you did not prejudge my client before you heard all the evidence. Thank you. So those are kind of words that if you know how to use it, you know what the commitment principle is. If it's active, open, and voluntary, it's more likely to be lived up to. And that's why it's so important that the settlement agreement, whatever is in the final resolution of the dispute, should be written down and signed by the parties and gone over to make sure that they know what they wrote down and that they will live up to and comply with the terms of that agreement. So that's really important to make sure you have that commitment to the settlement. Then the principle of scarcity is a powerful one, which we lawyers love to use. And it starts with the learning that opportunities appear more valuable when there's less of it. So people want more things when there's less of it, the limited supply. So, for example, um, coupons. Coupons always offer some kind of discount and a termination date. So if you don't act now, these coupons will no longer be valid. We love to use coupons. Go to Costco, go to CVS. We keep going back because we have coupons and we look at the date. And it motivates us, frankly, because if we don't use the coupons, we'll lose the dollars saved, right? We're still pretty cheap about that. But we like to save money, so we use coupons, but we watch to see. And it's called the scarcity principle, because when you say this is no longer available, that's called loss framing. And people are more inclined to try to avoid a loss than even seeking a gain. That's what was shown in many of these studies. So how is it engaged? By loss framing, showing how someone has to lose may be more persuasive than someone showing how much they have to gain. So you come to the end of the mediation. The defendant has an obligation of paying, $1 million. But what can he stretch? What can he borrow? How much can he make? How can he satisfy sufficiently for the plaintiff, the landlord, to give him enough money to make it so that we can get the case settled? Now, one of the principles is loss framing. If you do not settle at this figure and you go to trial, the facts are stacked against you that you're probably going to lose, and you'll have $1 million judgment. And he says, oh, no, it doesn't make a difference. I'll go into bankruptcy. Well, we know that bankruptcy is not really on the agenda. So he's got to stick with the problem. And when we've kept coming back to, look how much money you're going to spend trying to defend yourself. Look at how much you're going to lose. That helped persuade him to come up with everything he could to find a solution to settle the case, as opposed to waiting to trial where he may suffer and will suffer a much greater loss. And if you show what's unique about some, let's say, product, or what your unique proposition is as a lawyer, because you could settle cases, you know how to, handle employment cases, what's unique about your service, and you're showing, if you show that what you have is unique and is not always available to everybody, or you're doing it at a discount, then people will come along and may come and desire to use you. And so at the time I made this presentation, Tesla was just coming out, and it was a perfect example of showing, that there was unique elements about this car, and there were a limited number of supply. So it was very interesting to see reaction to the purchasing Tesla, and now you see them everywhere in Los Angeles. In fact, in real estate, this is always a big. If you don't buy the house now, it's going to be off the market. Somebody else will buy it. I know how much that has been used. So describe how the opportunity is limited, and here's the sauce for all of us. When you come to the end and you're at an impasse, and the offer is made, and the attorney says it's the last, best, and final offer, it will be withdrawn if not accepted tomorrow. That's a very powerful statement. And unless it's true, it will give someone real pause to comply and to accept that offer, because the other options are not available. And I know that lawyers in my mediations have used, or the threat of using, 998s, which can enhance the problem of loss for the defendant. So remember that loss framing can be very valuable in your negotiations if you know how to use it and how to activate it. For example, when you come to an impasse, what is the mediator's proposal all about? How can it be very effective? Number one, the timing of the proposal. It has to be done only after the parties have reached the end. They are ready to walk away. You don't come in too early and say, this is my opinion. And then the mediator's proposal will more likely be accepted if it has created a positive relationship of trust and demonstrated the knowledge and expertise. And this is what has been done in the past. And I can put my imprimatur on that I think this is fair to both sides. And then if you've already set the foundation, the parties more likely will accept your proposal. It should be viewed as fair and reasonable for both parties, and if not accepted, it could result in a loss for both sides, both of time, money, expense, etc. And particularly in probate, that's what I come up with all the time. In probate, generally, when you're fighting over an estate, it's only reducing the amount that's going to be available for final distribution, and both parties will suffer. So there's a lot about loss framing in probate cases because the parties are damaging themselves by continuing to litigate with huge legal expenses. And in today's world, we know litigation is not cheap. I can't imagine anybody taking a case to trial for under 50 to 100,000 without preparation and so forth. And so the seventh principle is a quick one. It's about being together. If you can show that you came from the same school, you have some affiliations, et cetera, et cetera. These are ways in which he said enhance your connection and trustworthy and rapport. So to be most effective, the principles have to be applied ethically. You have to plan in advance, just like you plan for the mediation or plan for your trial. You need to think about how we can use these principles ethically in the given situation and intuitively when they come up in the mediation, in the negotiation process going back and forth. So consider which of the principles can be applied appropriately to specific individuals. Consider these standards. Is the statement you're making truthful, or is it misleading? Are you a Bernie Madoff scoundrel, or are you, someone who can be trustworthy? Mandela, for example, are you truthful? Is it authentic or phony? People can detect the authenticity. Is it genuine or fake? Is it appropriate or not? And finally, does it benefit, as I say at the bottom, promote mutually beneficial long-term relationships, which could be the best outcome you could get for your client? So the takeaway message is when the opportunity arises to persuade, think of all the principles and how you might be able to incorporate them in your strategy by using things like praise and compliments and reciprocity, making concessions that are appropriate and realistic, giving compliments and reciprocity again, favors. One of the things I thought when I started using this, I thought one of my secret sauces was I put out a bowl of M&Ms, chocolate, peanut covered M&Ms, and I had them all over in bowls around the table. And I thought that was terrific. And I got some interesting, good results. People were very happy and thanked me for it and so forth. But then I came to a realization I'm only hurting them because the sugar content is so great that it's not a good idea to provide sugar. So I started putting out little cuts of apples and grapes and things like that showed I was concerned about their health. So you do little things like that. Sometimes they come back and you can be more effective in your relationship. It's building relationship and rapport. And so all these principles, get a commitment to a prior choice, consensus, show what others are thinking, show that if they don't accept that sometimes they could end up with a loss framing. They could lose more than they could gain, and show how by being together we can resolve this problem. So these are the principles of persuasion. I recommend many of these books. I've gone through my whole library. If you saw it, it's all about psychology, all about neuroscience, all about persuasion. That's what I've been doing for 25 years now. It's changed my life, and I hope that this just short introduction, believe me, 1 hour of this is just the tip of the iceberg. And I hope that you will take it seriously and incorporate it in your practice. And if you have situations which arise in which you use it, man, it would be thrilling to me if you would send me an email and let me know how you used it and that you got and the result of what you used. So that would be very exciting to me to see how we can enhance our practice as lawyers and mediators if we share the ideas here and how we can improve our ability to represent our clients, which is what our goal is as professionals, how can we make a better life for our clients and for the parties we help resolve disputes. So with that, I think we have 5 minutes. It's exactly 5 minutes left for questions. Thank you for being patient and listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that you'll come back to MCLA and we'll use our service. If you're not using it now, consider us for mediation. And I think you'll find us to be very efficient. We have a great, as I said, our great staff. We respond quickly, and we've gotten excellent reviews. By the way, we always use a client satisfaction survey to find out how the clients feel about the mediation process, the administration, and evaluating the mediator. And we have gotten some of the most remarkable responses that are truly exactly what we hope for, getting good results, but feeling that the mediator was fair, reasonable, knowledgeable, expert, empathetic, guided us to a good solution, and was very much the most effective in helping us get the result. We saved 5 days of trial that we know, and possibly more, not to mention all the litigation case costs that keeping going back to the court for more litigation. So we've gotten some excellent results. Check us out. We'll be happy to respond. So thank you. If you have any questions, please put them in the question and answer box. I'm going to exit out of this now.
Thank you so much, Myer. That was an amazing presentation. It was extremely informative. So thank you so much. I did open up the Q&A, and the biggest question is, will we be providing material? And yes, we will be providing material on this presentation. When I send out the questionnaire, I will provide the material. We will also be posting this video on our website shortly, so you can always access it later on. Does anyone have any questions about the material or general questions? I'll give everyone a few moments to type those in the Q&A if you have anything.
The slides will be in the video. You can see them. You can actually get other people to come and look at the presentation if you wish, but I don't put out the slides because I'm constantly changing them, and I don't want them to be shared until I actually know what's being shared. I have many. Every time I give this program, I always add something new or different, and I try to keep up with what's going on in the field. And so by sharing the slides, I feel I'm doing a little bit of a disservice as well. So you can get it online. If you have any questions, you want to follow up, I'm always here. I'm happy to respond. I'm happy to help you. If you want, you tell me a situation that you've got and you want to know how to use the principles, how you might, you've got a difficult negotiation, you want to use the principles, send me an email, tell me what's going on, and I'll try to respond.
Thank you so much, Myer. And I'm not sure if you can see the Q&A, but we have lots of folks that are saying it was a really wonderful presentation and that they have some research and studying to do. So I think that everyone is very satisfied and thankful for your presentation. I'll just give a couple more moments for anyone to drop any last questions. If not, we can go ahead and end today's session. As a reminder, I will send certificates once we receive approval from the State Bar, and I will also send the material and a questionnaire after today's session. The material will be in the form of an article, so you can refer back to the principles.
Thank you all for attending. Appreciate it. I hope you enjoy this and will use the principles.
Okay, I guess we can go ahead and conclude the session. Thank you, everyone, and be safe, and we'll see you soon.
So long.